With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
I really gave people more leadership roles. So I did allow, as we went along, seniors who'd been around, especially later on, that knew what they were doing, to take over 15 minutes of an offensive line meeting. All right, you're on. You're going to go over the blitzes for all these young people in the room. So when I told the coaches, if you've got a fourth-year defensive back who knows coverages as well as anybody in the NFL, give him 15 minutes in the meeting and let him run the meeting.
How does understanding the community you serve add to some longevity for you at that institution? How does serving create a synergistic effect with buy-in? And what can you do to create more leaders? How do we find better balance in this profession? Those are all questions we dive into today with retired head coach of the Coast Guard Academy, Bill George. Coach George spent 21 seasons as the head football coach at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. He helped build leaders and used football as a vehicle to do that. He recently wrote a book titled Unfulfilled. Coast Guard Academy football coach recounts the unfulfilled lives of World War II. We're excited to dig into a number of topics today with Coach, and we'll share our winning edge takeaways from this conversation following the interview.
What you see on tape is a direct reflection of what you teach and how you teach. Video is important, but if you don't teach well, you're not going to like what you see on your video. First Down Playbook has been helping coaches teach better for 13 years. It allows you to present installs, playbooks, and practice cards in half the time with NFL quality. Coaching tools like video pairing, a player app, practice schedules, and wristband sheets have made First Down Playbook a program management system with everything in one place. If you're in a position of leadership with your football program, receive a free 1-week look at First Down Playbook. Call them at 512-814-6158 or visit them on their website or social media. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code COACH24 to receive a $100 discount off the normal $700 First Down Playbook team membership price. Links and the phone number are in the show notes. As coaches, we know that some of the biggest hurdles to our team's success can come from off the field. Your team needs support to tackle the endless list of expenses, uniforms, training equipment, travel, and more. But raising that money can feel like a full-time job. Thankfully, there's Vertical Raise. Vertical Raise is the premier online fundraising platform using innovative technology to create the easiest and most efficient system available. Raise more money in less time with a local fundraising coach who works with your team every step of the way to customize the ideal fundraiser. With options for online donations, digital discount cards, premium product sales, and even spirit shops, Vertical Raise has top-of-the-line solutions for every fundraising style. To find out more, visit verticalraise.com and we'll get you connected with an exclusive offer on your first fundraiser. On today's podcast, we're going to talk about the idea of understanding the place you're at and the people that you serve, how football can be used as a vehicle to do bigger things, and how we maybe need to step back and realize that there's other things in this world besides football because we get so ingrained in it, in this game and what we do in our profession as coaches. Sometimes those things go by us. But joining me to discuss all of that is retired head coach at the Coast Guard Academy, author of the book Home Fields, which we'll talk about today, Bill George. Coach, great to have you here on the podcast. You and I have been talking for some time. This has been something we've had in the works, so I'm glad that we're finally able to sit down and talk some ball here.
Keith, it's an honor for me to talk to you about, coaching at the Coast Guard Academy and certainly about my book, but to talk to coaches in general.
Coach, I know as we were going over some things before we got started here, one of the things that really resonated with me and something that you said is that, you were able to be at the Coast Guard Academy and be in a unique position to be there as long as you have. Really, nobody has been at an academy, a service academy, as long as you, other than maybe Fisher DeBerry. But the main reason you were able to stay there, and I think this applies not just to the academies, I think it applies to high schools, I think it applies to the college level, I think in some ways it could even apply to the pros, is that you really understood what that organization, what that institution was about. You understood the people who were there and how you needed to serve them. And, football, while it may seem like it when we watch it on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, there's some uniformity to it, but the people, our institutions, the communities we serve are all diverse in some ways. And I think if you're going to be successful, if you're going to have longevity in this profession, especially at one place, you have to know that very well. And that's something that you were in tune with.
Yes, a long time ago, before I became head coach at Coast Guard, I was at the United States Military Academy Preparatory School, which is a prep school for West Point. They each have them. And, an individual there said to me, remember something, this is the military's academy. You can do all the coaching you want. And I got to Coast Guard and I remembered that. And all of us, we all get gung-ho and we're now a head coach for the first time, or we're even an assistant at a place, new school, high school, college. But I learned very early on that this place, the United States Coast Guard Academy, was producing leaders to protect our nation. They were producing officers, young men and women. And I used the sport of football to make them better officers. And when I ingrained that theory, that logic, the military also, the military leaders, the admirals, the captains, the enlisted, they also felt that was the way you run a football program. And I think that had to do with my longevity, to always say, this is about a place where we're trying to make America safer by training officers. And we have this fantastic sport of football, which really does train leaders, and it certainly helps training officers. So I ingrained that in as a base of our thing. We're going to be using this. And I think that the cadets who struggle through academics and struggle through a national service academy really enjoyed that way of doing it, putting them first academically and trained as leaders.
The biggest thing is you understood the goals of the school. If you were in a position to be able to take over a program, really doesn't matter what level it's at, thinking of that now, knowing that was a key thing for you, what's the recommendations? How would you approach that? Or how would you recommend that a young coach approach that as he's getting ready to take over a program, so that there is that mesh between the coach and the program he's building and the place that he's building it, right? Because you have to really, I think, as I said, build it for that place.
Yeah, that's a tremendous thing that I think coaches learn as they get older. I certainly did. I think it's really important that wherever you go as a coach, assistant or head coach, and I don't think you do this as a young person, and I didn't do it as a young coach. I will say that you look and say, what are the goals of these people? Okay, what are the goals of these young people? If it's an Ivy League school, maybe their goals are to become doctors and that stuff. If it's a young person who just wants to get to college education, how do you get them the college education? If it's a young person in high school and they want to get their footing on the ground and their life back in order, then you look at that goal. And I think when you're a young coach, all you look at is those scoreboards and those results and those touchdowns. And then as you get older, and certainly not much older, but as you progress in the sport of football, I think it's important that you look at the people first, not the scoreboard first, but the people and what the academic institution is trying to achieve at that place. So I think it shifts from, okay, I got to win football games as a coach, to, hey, what's important to this person's life?
In looking at that side of it, you mentioned to me that really this is the vehicle. What we're doing as coaches is a vehicle to make a better person. Football will help make a better person. In your case, with what your guys wanted to do and the goals that they had, it certainly was about making a better leader, making a better officer. Knowing that it's a vehicle, what was that approach to I guess be able to bring that into everything you were doing. Again, we get blinders on, we get tunnel vision on, got to win the game this week. And, you can in some ways forget about those things. Or I think what might be better said is you can set your systems up to make sure that stuff is built in. What was your approach to that?
One of the things is you have to certainly at an academy, we'd have rough seasons, but I noticed that if I didn't get too down on these, I'm not saying you don't get down when teams don't do the right thing, but if you stayed positive, if you found positive things, and I know in a world where everything is, we're in the National Football League playoffs, and all that really matters is who goes on to the Super Bowl. But you had to find positive things even in defeat. And if you didn't get down on people, if you made them believe that they could, or told them you were struggling alongside of them in a loss, by the next Tuesday, guys at the Coast Guard Academy were ready to rally back, even through tough seasons. Now, I understand a lot of that is the personality of a cadet, but I learned as I got older to stay more positive, to find success, even to find a silver lining in a cloud, let's say. So it's more than who has the most light bulbs on the scoreboard. We battled, we played hard, we fought. Here's what was done good. Great job, and here's what we did wrong. Let's correct those mistakes. But try to stay, on a positive note, and just to keep kids engaged, to keep challenging. It's tough at academy. Look at the records of all the academies this year. I mean, I know they had good records and they played hard, but it's a tough struggle for any academy to play football.
So when we think about the academies, we think about a very regimented way of doing things. And as you were talking about some of those things there, it reminded me of a book I'm currently reading by Michael Lombardi called Football Done Right. And in it, he talked about Earl Blake, who was a longtime coach at Army, inspired a number of coaches, had a guy there, an assistant there by the name of Vince Lombardi working for him, and told Vince he had to tone it down, that he was too hard on these guys, too rough on these guys, that he wanted a little bit of a different approach, an intellectual approach to doing things. And we see those approaches, two very diverse approaches. Guys can make them work well. What was your approach to again, as you said, making the best leaders out of these guys that they could be, using football as that vehicle to make them better officers and help them launch their careers in the Coast Guard?
The first thing I learned early on is not to set a lower bar. So although Vince Lombardi and Red Blake may have toned it down a touch, I don't think they ever lowered the bar. So you keep the bar up there higher. Hey, we're still shooting to try to win the league. We're still shooting to try to make the NCAA playoff bids in Division III. That's our goal. We want to get there. So I didn't do that. I did mellow a little, as all coaches do, with the yelling part. I think that was, I became, these people responded more to correction than they did a loud correction. So I learned that as I went. I think that I just really wanted to focus that you're getting as much out of this game of football as you are any other place on this academy campus. And I said many times, there's no toughness building here at the Coast Guard Academy. It's done down here, and toughness is a part of life. So I tried to stress that being tough. I don't mean, dirty on the field. I meant tough and legging it out and gutting it out and all the things you do. The other thing I learned as I went along, that I really gave people more leadership roles. So I did allow, as we went along, seniors who'd been around, especially later on, that knew what they were doing, to take over 15 minutes of an offensive line meeting. All right, you're on. You're going to go over the blitzes for all these young people in the room. I let people who were seniors, and I don't know if I ever had ever seen that before. So when I told the coaches, if you've got a fourth-year defensive back who knows coverages as well as anybody in the NFL, give him 15 minutes in the meeting and let him run the meeting. So we did that in a sense where we said, hey, this is what you're going to do. You're the senior, you know these things. And so I think that was part of it. And you let guys have freedom when they want to talk and speak and do those things. Football at any other college is the hardest part of the day. At these 5 national service academies, it's the easiest part of the day. So you want to make it fun also.
it goes back to that idea of really understanding the place you're at and the parameters set for those guys, whether it's you're at a high academic institution that requires, those guys. I mean, you might not even get close to your 20 hours, right? You have to be efficient with their time and take those things into consideration. I think when you look at those things from that perspective and understand the place, understand the people, I think you're more able to get their buy-in, to get them to really learn things, as you said, where those guys can get up and teach and lead, and you can trust them to do that it just becomes a synergistic effect.
You're 100% right on saying you get them for the buy-in. Once we had young players and they understood that our goal was to get them to graduate and be officers, which was their goal at an academy, they bought into football. Once I said, my goal is for you to become an officer, okay? Forget about everything else. You tell me what you need. I'll help you. I'll put that a number one priority. We had a rule. If you were a freshman and you walked up to me before practice, you couldn't send me a note. You had to come see me and said, Coach, I need to go see a professor. I would let any freshman do that. I probably would let any upperclassman do it, but it's mostly the freshmen. Once we made that rule of freshman release for academics, everybody bought into our system. And, once we did that and said, you have the ability to do that. I know it's hard to say, okay, you got a freshman who's your second string left tackle and he knows he's got to pick up all the blitzes and he's got to know everything. And here you are letting him go up the chemistry review on a Wednesday at 4:00. But once we did that, everyone bid in. So they bid into that. We were trying to make their goal, number one goal. Let me not do it too complicated. The number one goal was to get you to become an officer. It isn't for me to become a fabulous coach and win football games.
So I have to ask a little bit on that approach because I love it. That idea that they actually had to come to you, not send you a note. And, you look at, our ways of communicating today instantaneously with text and, heck, we didn't used to have phones with us at all the time. I mean, I fought that forever, but now we do. Do you still think there's a value in saying, to a coach like that? I've been at those places where, a lab comes up or something that is out of their control, but instead of just sending me an email or a text, but show up, spend the 5 extra minutes to get in front of me and let me know and talk about it. Is there value to doing that today?
Yeah, I think it is. It's making you accountable. We had an honor coach. Suppose a kid overslept and said to me, I was up in chemistry review and it never said that to me. And an admiral walks down on the field and says, "Where's Joe Smith?" Oh, he's up in chemistry review. I was up there. I didn't see him. So that tied in a little bit to the honor code. So they came to me in person. But again, you're right. It is about accountability, just discussing it. I also wanted to know why, your chemistry teacher says you're an A student. What's going on? Why do you need to miss because of chemistry or anything? It also gave me another line. There's a military regime, just like there is at a private college. You're only going to see guys at 4:00. So if I don't see you in practice, I'm going to see you for 5 minutes that day. And you can come to me and just say, Coach, I need to go to chemistry review. Wonderful. You know what I mean? So I think that was another thing, just to make sure everything was okay. People are a long way from home and people have a lot of problems, whether a long way from home or not. So I also wanted to make sure that it was chemistry that the kid was bothering the kid. Maybe it was something else. So it gave me a chance to talk to someone that day for 2 minutes and, hey, you need to go to chemistry. Is everything else going on good? So it gave me that one-on-one contact at a place where everything is scheduled from 6 a.m. till midnight, between study hours and marching and military training and all that.
With all of this, it seems that you've kept really grounded in there. This is more than football, but you did write a book, Home Fields, and you said you did characterize yourself as somebody self-centered in there. And certainly there's lessons that come through that I want to talk about. But first, for our audience, if you would talk to us a little bit about that book and why you wrote it and what it's about.
It's a book about family caregiving, coaching college football, and it is about, as the subtitle says, the unfulfilled lives of World War II. I was wrote it over a 6-week period. I wrote it over a decade, but the book takes place in a 6-week period. My wife and I, adopted very late in life our first and only child. She is now 4.5. My father is on my couch dying in hospice care. And I am obsessed with beating the Merchant Marine Academy, our arch rival, in a football game. He starts talking about his childhood in an immigrant village on Cayuga Lake in Myers, New York, where everyone grew up and went off to World War II. And some came home and some didn't, and the tragic lives. So I go back and forth in this book. The relationships of my daughter and my father, the relationships of me with the Coast Guard Academy in football. And certainly as he went on hospice and they cut out his meds, everything became clearer. And we had housefulls of people, so it was a caregiving thing. And he talks about these people who grew up, in this simple life back in the 30s, and then all of a sudden they find themselves on the center stage, of the world. And so I combined all three, and it's a book about relationships, the people he grew up with as he recalls it, as well as my daughter and him as he's dying. And one of the first people was a Coast Guard attorney, Admiral Sandra Stowe's, an admiral, took me under her wing and helped me find a publisher because she liked the book. But an attorney read the book and he said, you've hung yourself out there. You've made yourself an anti-hero in your own football memoir. And I did center it, that I was a football coach, as all these other meaning of life things are going on. I'm only obsessed with this football game.
There's a lot of lessons in reading this type of story. We do tend to get caught up in what we do and get tunnel vision and intentionally or unintentionally make decisions to miss out on other things in life. I told you, for me, there came a point when I needed to step back and say, I've missed too much of my kids growing up. I'm not seeing them do their thing. And, even though this doesn't feel to me to be what I want to do, I need to do it. What kinds of things, I do want coaches to read this book, but what will they take away from it? What are some of the main things that are going to come through for them that, maybe aren't evident right now?
Well, certainly if you read about the people that grew up, what my dad recalls, they went off, they had simple, wonderful lives. Some went on and lived long, and some did not get to fulfill their dreams. And that's what we see every day, tragedy around us where lives are shortened. And in this case, it was that. So it is about lives that don't get to fulfill their dreams. Coast Guard Academy football coach recounts the unfulfilled lives of World War II is a lot of the basis. There's a line in the book referring to what you said, where it's the week before the game. I think it's the Sunday before the game. And my wife comes over to the computer at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday and says, you're watching film on the computer at 10 a.m. You're going to skip church. Your 4-year-old daughter is playing with your dying father on the couch over there. And you're going to leave the house in an hour and not come back till midnight because you're going to be at film all day. You're removed from the world that is around you. You know what I mean? And I think that can happen. You just get removed. And that's the part of me that I wanted to show. And I don't think I overdid it, but it's true. We get wrapped up in our own world and we don't see the suffering world around us. And maybe that's also what I wanted to bring out in the people that he grew up with, that he lived with that sorrow his whole life, and of people who went off to World War II, some who came back and some who did not.
Kirsten, looking at that idea of what we do, and I mean, I think that story of a Sunday, probably every single one of us has lived that numerous times, good intentions on a Sunday, maybe to do some of those things with the family and church like you're supposed to do, but you end up watching film and all those kinds of things. And we have seen, though, really, I think the pandemic really offered a different way of looking at things because of the technologies that it evolved to connect us when we weren't allowed to connect. I would say that in some regards, maybe we've just added more to our plate because we have all these technologies instead of taking it away. But what would be your approach today with what you have available to be able to get more of, your personal life, more involved in your personal life by saying, we have better tools today. to do this, what kinds of things would you do? What would you look to implement in terms of, I guess, creating a better way for you and your staff, and especially the families that are involved in this as well?
I think that I grew up in that era where, you're in the football office all day Sunday. And it was hard for me to get away from that. And I felt, if we weren't doing that, then we weren't doing things right. And I hear a lot of coaches now change that. Even, I went to the coaches convention in Nashville, and I heard a lot of coaches who certainly were younger than me, but not a lot younger. And they said they had changed their hours. I think the Sunday, Monday thing is the biggest thing. The hours spent coming home late on Sunday, spending the whole Sunday in the office. And that's one of the things that, as I looked forward to retirement, one of the things I set my goals for was, I thought I spent so much of my life in the football office on a Sunday and a Monday. I mean, I understand it. At the academy, you didn't get off the field till later, and they ate their meal later, so you weren't getting home till later every night. But that's the biggest thing I would tell these young people. And certainly I wish I had done it too in later years. I just didn't have the confidence that I could do it, is to change those long Sunday film sessions. Can you watch more film at home? Can you do it for an hour or two? Can you grade the film differently? Instead of spending these long Sundays and Mondays in the office till late 10, 11 at night, that's the number one thing I would change.
When you look back at all those hours, I know I have my own opinion on this too, and I think we all get caught up in that idea. We're not going to leave any stone unturned. We're going to outwork our opponent, which just seems to be a war of attrition, right? Because what does that mean? But how would you refine things? You said maybe not watch as much film. I've heard coaches talk about different approaches to it, even with what they share with their players. I mean, with anything, right, you can overdo it, right? There can be too much, which, paralyzes thought processes as well as taking up time. Where do you think you would find some efficiencies in looking at a better way of doing things, spending your time on a Sunday in the office, et cetera?
Well, I think probably trying to watch as much film as you can at home instead of the travel time in, making your hours shorter. Years ago, I think when I was an assistant at Ithaca, a friend of mine called me up and said, what are you doing up there in the office? And I said, well, we're meeting, we're doing football, we're watching this, we're meeting. Yeah, and the person said to me, the human brain really doesn't work after 10 o'clock at night. And it dwindles from about 7 on. And so that's a true, and I've noticed that in retirement as well. It works much better in the day. So, I think of all these night things. Are you just sitting in the office because you think the other coach is sitting in the office at 10 at night? And are you not leaving? So I think if you can assign people to do, and I know it's a work from home environment in our world now, and you can't do that coaching football. But if there's a way to change the Sunday to, everybody grade the film on their own, or maybe even do a Zoom call quickly for 2 hours in your living room for a meeting. And so you can walk out and jump, play baseball with your son in the backyard instead of, driving down there and those things. And the same thing with, okay, we got to eat in Sunday and Monday nights, and we waste 2 hours ordering dinner and 2 hours eating dinner. And what a waste. Let's get this done. And we should be eating dinner with our families. And so I think I certainly would do that. I'd arrange some kind of more Zoom meetings like we're doing right now, and say to people, I also think you have to say this: you're in charge of the defensive line, and I didn't overlook my coaches at all that much, but I did look at the film. But I don't know if I have to come in and sit with the defensive coaches, just grade the film and we'll talk about it and all that. And I'm not saying cut out film at all. I'm just saying the hours in the office, were
right.
Especially in Division III. I had, a retired Division III head coach, Don Miller, coaching with me, and he was older. And I had Jay Driscoll was a local English teacher. I mean, how many hours can I keep a local English teacher in the office on Monday night?
Yeah.
So those kind of things. So I definitely think there's a better way to do it. And I think I went through that era where you're keeping up with the Joneses and you got to be in the office day and night, and no one can get the flu. You can't get the flu if you're a football coach. You got to be in. And I think that's wrong. I think that's the people who get hurt are your children and your family.
Yeah. There's a lot we need to look at and examine and always be asking, why are we doing things and how can we do it better? The reflection part is such a big part of this game. If you just keep blindly doing things the same way, one, you might not be doing it in the best way. And two, you might be hurting the other people around you. I think this requires balance. And that is probably the most difficult thing as a coach. It was the most difficult thing for me. It wasn't learning the X's and O's or spending time watching film or spending time with the players. I mean, sometimes, it was almost too giving. I think coaches are very giving, but I think, it is, as you said, remembering some of those things. And I guess at the end of it, when you write your own memoirs, not having to go back and paint yourself as the anti-hero in those things, correct?
Yeah, and it's true. And again, I know the book goes back and forth, and I think I managed to pull this off. But there's a scene in the book, if I might, be so bold as to talk about it, where these two guys are 18 years old and they're about to go off to war, and it's early December, and they know they're going to go eventually soon, and they're watching an ice skater. I won't tell much, but skate across a frozen creek. And one says to the other one, time is moving like that frozen creek below us. And the other one says, what do you mean it's moving like we see the ice and we don't think time is moving, but that water underneath the ice is moving and it's gone before we know it. And we don't see time moving. And I think that's a big thing that I started to reflect on as a coach. Time is moving. It's moving for our children. It's moving for us. We're not guaranteed an infinite number of hours of time. So I think if you can think it that way, you maybe put into perspective that it's important to put our families first.
Definitely. Coaches, the book is Home Field's Coast Guard Academy football coach recounts the unfulfilled lives of World War II. You can find it at homefieldbooks.com. You can find it on Amazon. We'll put the link to that in our show notes as well. Coach, I really appreciate, one, you taking the time to write a book like this. I think, it captures a lot there. My grandfather was a World War II vet, and I know how much sacrifice, that generation put into making this country what we expected it to be. And so I appreciate you writing it from that perspective, but I also appreciate what went into it in, showing the thought process of a coach and some of the things that are, we all struggle with. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for writing the book, and I look forward to talking with you more in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was an honor to talk with you, Keith. I really appreciate this. And, if any coaches ever want to get a hold of me or talk or anything, I'll talk about it. When you get retired, you tend to babble on because you got no one to talk to. So anybody wants to talk about anything, I'm open.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Keith.
Here are winning edge takeaways and ideas for implementation. 1. Understand the community you serve. Don't undervalue the needs of the people who are part of your football community, both the players and the institution. There's something unique there beyond winning football games, and if you can tap into that, your time at that institution can be more impactful and fulfilling. That's exactly what Coach George did at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. 2. Give people leadership roles. The more leaders you have, the stronger the culture of your program will become. It shouldn't all fall on the coaches or a select group of players who are your captains. Everyone has the ability to lead in some way. Be sure to find ways to tap into it. And 3, always be looking for the best way to do things and take the other people that your job affects, primarily your family and your coaches' families, into account. Finding a way to cut a day of commuting or staying at the office for a meal gives time back to your families. We have so much technology at our fingertips today, so we want to make sure that we use it to make our lives better and the work we do more efficient and effective. Coach George is a former D3 coach like myself. D3 football is near and dear to my heart, and for that reason, we're excited to present the D3 Top 25 Clinic. With over 50 speakers from the top 25 teams and statistical leaders, it's headlined by the D3 national champions at SUNY Cortland head coach Kurt Fitzpatrick, and his coordinators will be presenting. We have an exciting lineup of coaches sharing ideas which help their teams, units, and position groups excel and become the best at what they do in the country. I'll put the link in our show notes, but I also encourage you to find the link from our speakers that you know, as any ticket purchased through their link allows them to share in the ticket revenue. It's a new model we are presenting with an opportunity for the coaches to capitalize more on sharing their time and their intellectual property. We'll be adding more speakers and topics to the website over the next few days, but we have over 50 coaches who will be presenting. Sign up more coaches from your program and save. The link to the website is d3football.coachesclinic.com. Be sure to follow all we're doing on coachingcoordinator.com and sign up for a weekly tip sheet, and follow us on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.